You are welcome to yet another intriguing class in government. Today, I will be exposing you to the topic colonial administration. Specifically, we shall be looking at the colonial administration as adopted by the British government in administering her colony, especially the Nigeria. First, let's look at the lesson objectives. By the end of this lesson, you should be able to first explain the principles and structure of British colonial administration in Nigeria. Also, you should be able to discuss the impact of colonial administration in Nigeria and West Africa, and as well as explain the advantages and disadvantages of colonial rule. Now, let's look at colonialism. What does colonialism mean? Colonialism is defined as the imposition of a more developed culture over a less developed one, always backed up with expansionist and economic adventurism. Now, colonialism started as a result of industrial revolution in Europe, when they started looking for raw materials and also a market base where they could sell their products. That led to the scramble for a partition of Africa. And after the Berlin Conference of 1884-85, European countries started colonizing various parts of the world, especially Africa. Britain colonized Nigeria, Ghana, the Gambia, and Sierra Leone in West Africa. In Nigeria, the Britain adopted a system known as indirect rule. In Nigeria, all visible oppositions were removed, and gradually they amalgamated the Lagos colony, the southern and northern protectorates. This video you are about to watch will expose you more to the nitty-gritty of indirect rule system as adopted by the British in Nigeria.
Indirect rule was a system of governance that was predominantly used by Britain to govern pre-existing power structures in colonial Africa. The French used direct rule. In this video, we shall know what indirect rule is, how and why the British used indirect rule to govern Nigeria, the features of indirect rule in northern and southern Nigeria, and of course, the advantages and disadvantages of indirect rule. In Nigeria, the indirect rule system was introduced by the country's first Governor General, Lord Frederick Lugard, who felt that Nigeria, being very big and vast, would be impossible to handle if the British ruled directly. Lugard introduced the indirect rule system around the year 1906 when he was High Commissioner of the Northern Provinces of Nigeria. Hence, he employed the services of traditional rulers with their traditional political system who would rule their areas and be subject to the orders of the British administration. Indirect rule operated thus: the British governors made the traditional rulers intermediaries between them and the people and allowed the people to retain their cultures. They did this to ensure that the people see them less as intruders but as partners with the traditional institutions already in place. It is important to note that they only did this regarding chiefs that welcomed them with open arms. Others who didn't were either banished or killed and then replaced. In the north, the political administration system was highly centralized and it had the full cooperation of the people. There was also a tax system already in place. Hence, it was easier for indirect rule to thrive there. The northern province was divided into 6 provinces headed by a British official known as the Resident. The provinces were further divided into districts that were headed by an official known as District Commissioner. Some of the factors that contributed to the success of indirect rule in Nigeria are: 1. The use of the existing traditional administration, which was centralized; 2. The submissiveness of the people, as the emir was the absolute ruler, an autocrat that the people feared and revered. The only change was that the emirs were answerable to the British officials. 3. The Islamic religion, which recognizes obedience to the traditional rulers. And finally, a well-organized system of taxation, as the money generated from the taxes was used for the running of the government by the British. As a result of these factors, indirect rule thrived in northern Nigeria and governance was pretty much straightforward. However, in the south, it was a little bit complicated. Southern Nigeria was not as homogeneous as the north. It was divided mainly into the west and east. So, how was indirect rule in these regions? In the east, there was no centralized system of governance. Every man was a king in his own home. With the introduction of indirect rule in Nigeria, warrant chiefs like Ayebi Ugbabe were introduced to rule instead and collect taxes on behalf of the British. This development was met with great resistance from the people as they didn't see a reason to have a ruler. This resistance would later lead to a revolt, the Abaumes Revolt, in 1929. The West, on the other hand, was on a middle ground. The indirect rule was partially successful due to the checks and balances inculcated in their political system. The Yoruba Obas were not absolute like in the north, thus they were accountable to their people. However, one thing in the favor of the indirect rule present in the Yoruba administration was the payment of taxes. The Yoruba people were already used to paying taxes, unlike in the east, where the people were not comfortable with it. The major failure of the indirect rule in the West was that the Obas were devoid of Western education and did not understand the English language. This the British used to their advantage in signing treaties in a language the Obas didn't understand. However, some educated Yorubas like Abat Olayinka Macaulay opposed the indirect rule and fought for nationalism. So, why did the British introduce indirect rule in Nigeria? Due to a lack of adequate personnel, the British administration could not rule directly in Nigeria because of the vastness of the lands and the population of the people. If peradventure an insurrection should occur, the British may not have the manpower to suppress it. The colonialists also did not understand the local languages spoken in Nigeria as they varied from place to place, and there was a need to communicate with the people if their rule was going to be a success. Hence, the indirect rule, needing only a few interpreters to communicate with the rulers. Finally, a lack of finance and the need to preserve traditional institutions so as to gain the people's favor were other reasons for indirect rule in Nigeria. In addition, it was easier to rule the people through these traditional institutions. Now, let us take a look at some of the advantages and disadvantages of indirect rule in Nigeria. 1. The traditional mode of operation was modernized and new policies were adopted to administer the governance of the localities. 2. A lot of the traditional practices which were inhumane and wrong were criminalized and stopped. 3. Indirect rule was way cheaper than the direct rule as finances were not enough to employ officials that would aid in the ruling full-time. Plus, there would be a provision of accommodation, feeding, and other essentials. 4. The British invaders did not replace the culture of the people with their cultures, but instead used these to their benefit, enabling and developing the trust of the people. 5. The traditional chiefs were recognized and given prominence and respect. This they did to acquire the trust of the people. However, traditional rulers that refused to work for the British, like Jaja of Okpobo and Nana Olomu, were either removed or killed. It is pertinent to note that these rulers were only stooges and employees of the British administration. They had no mind of their own. Now to the disadvantages. 1. The chiefs became autocratic, greedy, and ruthless as the system placed more powers than the traditional system had deposited in them. 2. The British needed the ignorance and timidity of the rulers and used this to their advantage. Hence, the elites and the educated members of the society were sidelined for the fear that they would question their policies. 3. The chiefs were caught between serving the people as their representatives and obeying the British administration. They mostly preferred the latter to the former, and it led to clashes between these chiefs and their people, especially in the east. Finally, the chiefs and emirs, due to the benefits and autocratic model of governance they enjoyed, contributed mainly to the delay in the constitutional development advocated for by the early nationalists. In summary, Indirect rule was a kind of rule where existing tribal structures and traditions were used as channels for establishing rules and regulations, while the British officials worked behind the scenes and could exercise veto power. In some cases, the British designated a person to act as chief in settings where there was no clear hierarchical structure in place. If you have opened your eyes to something new, give us a thumbs up by clicking on the like button and sharing this video with your friends. You can also watch our next video on how Britain bought Nigeria for 53 billion naira in 1900.